So we have a bipartisan infrastructure deal that's ready. We have a reconciliation partisan deal on human infrastructure that's ready to go. The partisan one is $3.5 trillion. The provisions are, or a bunch of the provisions are now public. But naturally, you already have Joe Manchin balking a little bit, and you have, I'm sure some of the other conservative Democrats are behind the scenes saying, we don't want this thing in there, we don't want that thing in there. For argument's sake, though, let's say a deal eventually is ironed out. So maybe it's not 3.5 trillion, maybe it's 2 trillion, and maybe it still has some really good provisions in it, like universal pre-K or childcare or whatever. So for argument's sake, let's say we have the votes necessary to pass the partisan reconciliation bill. One of the things that the Democrats did previously, that they're definitely gonna do again, hear me now, quote me later, is they're gonna say, well, we wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and we put it in the bill, so you guys can't get mad at us if you're, part of our base voters. But it's the Senate Parliamentarian has made a ruling and declared we're not allowed to put X, Y, or Z in this partisan reconciliation bill. Now, the Senate Parliamentarian excuse might be trotted out right now when the bill that came out of committee is $3.5 trillion. Or they might bring out the Senate Parliamentarian excuse when they negotiate that bill further, and it's like $2 trillion or $1.5 trillion. But at some point, this Senate Parliamentarian excuse is coming. And Politico actually sort of let everybody in on the game and on the trick here by accident in a recent portion of an article on this. So let me show you that. The most glaring obstacle here is the Senate rulebook. To pass muster, the immigration reforms, so they want to put immigration in that bill, immigration reform in the partisan reconciliation bill. Immigration reforms would have to significantly impact the federal budget by generating revenue or deepening the deficit, rather than merely being a side effect. Even raising the minimum wage failed to make the cut under that criterion earlier this year. CNN quotes former Senate parliamentarian Alan Fruman, who isn't buying it, quote, I understand arguments are made that there are budgetary effects when you change immigration law, but I think there's probably a strong argument that those effects are secondary. Democrats' purpose is immigration policy. Democrats seem to think they win either way. Worst, most likely case, the parliamentarian rebuffs them. But at least they can tell the base they tried. The stuff they're planning to include polls well, but Republicans are prepared to pounce if they do. Senator John Cornyn, Republican of Texas, who's been involved in bipartisan immigration talks in the past, warned that Democrats will have to own it if they go down this road on hot-button issues, presumably meaning in the 2022 midterms. So, they just admitted that they're scamming you. The scam is, look at all these amazing things we put in our reconciliation bill. We swear we're in favor of every single one of these things, and we're going to fight for it. But the Senate parliamentarian twisted our arm and said, we can't put in immigration reform, for example, or we can't put in climate change provisions, for example. So they're effectively, I need you to stop and think about this, they're effectively giving the Senate parliamentarian a line item veto on their bill. A line item veto is something that's so powerful, the president doesn't even have the ability to do a line item veto on a bill. If a bill makes it to the president's desk, the president can't say, I'm vetoing, 4 of the 80 provisions or whatever. And there have been presidents in the past who argued they want that ability. They want a line item veto, and they do not have a line item veto. But what we're talking about here is giving the Senate parliamentarian a line item veto. Now, let me explain to you why that's absolutely absurd. the Senate parliamentarian is just an advisory staffer. The Democrats make it seem like they're basically an emperor who gets the last say on all legislation. They make it seem like they have real power and can override the elected officials that we picked. They absolutely do not have that power. In fact, all they're really supposed to do in their advisory role is tell people, hey, here's what the precedent is. So here's what's happened previously on such questions. That's all they're supposed to do. And you know what? The Senate parliamentarian, if you don't like what they're saying, Kamala can override them. She's in the position to override the Senate parliamentarian. Or they could fire the Senate parliamentarian and bring in a new Senate parliamentarian. Or they could create new rules to change the way reconciliation packages are done to allow specific things. So, for example, they're now discussing with H.R. 1, voting rights reform, they're discussing, hey, let's do a carve-out to allow anything involving voting rights to pass with a simple majority. Now, how many votes are needed in order to change the rules so that it's only 51 votes to get voting rights reform passed? All you need is 51 votes. So a simple majority can give you the ability to change the rules to make it so simple majorities pass whatever kind of legislation you want. See, this is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. The media is incredibly misleading with how they're talking about all of this stuff. They don't tell you that Democrats have the ability to do what they want. They have the majority in the House, they have the majority in the Senate, and they have the presidency. And there's been countless examples of the rules being changed to go around, circumvent the filibuster. There are, get this, 161 exceptions to the filibuster. Now, how did we get those? We got those by the majority party changing the rules. So, for example, fast tracking of votes on trade negotiations. That's one of the things that they said you can do that with 51 votes. Expediting votes on military base closures. That's another one. They just changed the rules and said you could do that with a simple majority. I mean, overturning the Congressional Review Act. So, federal regulations that are being overturned by Congress, it doesn't require 60 votes. It only requires 51 votes. So if the federal government, executive agencies are implementing some regulations that the Senate doesn't like, all you need is 51 votes to say, don't implement that regulation. And this didn't used to be the case, but they changed the rules to make it the case. The filibuster was reformed in 1996, 2011, 2013, 2017, 2019. It was reformed recently on Supreme Court judges. So now it's just a simple majority to get somebody on the Supreme Court, when previously you had to go through regular order and it was 60. But McConnell changed the rule and said, nah, now it's 51. So this idea where people scream and bitch and moan, but the tradition of filibuster, you cannot override something so deeply part of our democracy. It is literally undemocratic. Regardless of what your personal opinion is on the filibuster, it is small d democratic. That's what it is. Or excuse me, small u, undemocratic. It is undemocratic. It is not small d democratic. Because democratic would be simple majority wins. So they've changed it a number of times. And by the way, the first time a filibuster was actually used was 1837. So not at the founding of our country. Again, there's 161 exceptions to the filibuster. 161. So here's what Democrats could do if they actually cared about getting all of these provisions into law. They could attack this in a number of different ways, guys. So right now, I think the rule is to use reconciliation. Obviously, whatever you're passing with a simple majority needs to impact the budget. But you only get like 2 or 3 cracks at reconciliation for the whole year. That's it. So one of the things the Democrats could do is, oh, we changed the rules. Now we get 10 cracks at reconciliation per year. Or we get 4, or we get 6, or whatever. All you need is 51 votes to say we're giving more chances at reconciliation per year. That's it. That's one thing they could do. Hey, we get more cracks at reconciliation. They can reform the filibuster back to the talking filibuster to make the opposition party have to talk. So if you make it so that they actually have to physically filibuster, then they wouldn't be able to filibuster nearly as much as they can filibuster now, because the way it works is now all the Republicans have to do is say, we are declaring that we are filibustering. And that's it. And then they're filibustering, and then you need 60 votes to get through regular order. So you can reform the filibuster. You can change the reconciliation rules to make it so you have more cracks at reconciliation. You can make specific carve-outs on specific issues. So yeah, for reconciliation, it has to impact the budget, or it has to be voting rights or immigration. Whatever. You could change the rules to whatever you want to change the rules to. So this fake hopelessness is what drives me crazy, because it's dishonest on the part of the Democrats. It is completely dishonest. They know they can overrule the parliamentarian. They know they could fire the parliamentarian, get a new parliamentarian. They know the parliamentarian is just a staffer who gives an advisory opinion on what the precedent is. But they're pretending like they have more power so they can say, oh, it's not me. I was overruled by the emperor, the parliamentarian who's unelected. That is what drives me absolutely crazy. And the worst part of all of it is the media. The media is the worst part of all of it. Because it's the job of the media to tell you these things I just told you. To give you the facts, how they're not hopeless. They could do whatever they want. But they're not telling you that. Go read articles on the Parliamentarian. You will see words such as the Parliamentarian ruled, the Parliamentarian declared, the Parliamentarian decreed, the Parliamentarian shot it down. And that's not what they're doing. So they're using definitive, declarative, certain language in order to say there's no way around this. But that is total bullshit. Whatever the Democrats want to get, they can get. They can get. And not only that, as I just described to you, there's a million ways they can get what they want. A million ways. One more example. Did you know in 2001, there were provisions in the Bush tax cuts that the Republican Senate parliamentarian at the time was like, you can't do this through reconciliation. You know what happened? Trent Lott fired the parliamentarian and brought in a new one, and then kept it in the Bush tax cuts, the provisions that they said, oh, you can't do this through reconciliation. So they heard out the parliamentarian, they went, that's interesting, you're fired, and brought in a new one who allowed them to do it. So there's a million ways you can address this if you actually care to get it through, and that's the point. They don't really care. They just want to be able to tell the base, we tried, but it's not us. It's the Republicans, and it's the damn parliamentarian who overruled us, even though the parliamentarian doesn't have the ability to overrule. Oh, they're so weaselly, and they're such liars, man. At least be honest with people, but they're not. And that's like the $15 minimum wage. This is exactly what happened with that. Oh, yeah, we wanted to, but we couldn't, because the thing and the stuff and the parliamentarian, the Emperor God King, decided it's a no-go. And so, widowed me, the President of the United States has no power anymore because the parliamentarian. Bullshit. So they're going to lie to you. That's what's going to happen. And remember, this segment is being recorded beforehand, before this happens. But the Senate parliamentarian is going to come out and say, can't have immigration reform, can't have whatever, fill in the blank, climate change stuff. It's going to be a number of things that the parliamentarian says you can't do that through reconciliation. So at the end of the day, we might be left with anywhere from a $1 trillion bill to a $2 trillion bill. And it might have some decent stuff in there, but it's not going to be anywhere near as comprehensive as it needs to be, given the scale of the problems that we're facing. But I need you to understand they are fucking lying to you. They're lying to you. So when, they act like it's all the Republicans' fault or it's all the Senate parliamentarians' fault or whatever, I'm telling you in advance, they can get whatever they want to get, and they have a number of ways to get it. And when they don't get it, it's because they simply don't want to. They don't care enough. They just want to be able to tell the base, we tried, but we couldn't get like 80% of the things that we needed. So there you have it. Don't buy this helplessness kabuki theater, because it's not true. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.